The 13th documentary analysis by Connor Martin and Linnea McKinsey. The central theme that the director of the documentary develops is the issue of African Americans' incarceration in the United States as an act of racial profiling under the prison industrial complex. The issues raised include the constitutional gaps that have been exploited even after the Emancipation Declaration and enactment of the 13th Amendment, which guaranteed the rights of the freed. The director uses various persuasion techniques. Among the two most pronounced is the usage of statistics and interviews from specialists to back up evidence. The documentary opens up with a startling statistic, such as the statement that 1 out of every 4 African American males are likely to serve a jail term in their life, followed by a voiceover by President Barack Obama on how the United States compares with other nations in the world and its overall incarceration rates. The significance of the use of this puzzling statistic is that it shocks the viewers, as well as shows the magnitude of the problem. Therefore, statistics appeal to logic, which is an unbiased way of evaluating problems since they offer a comparative way of showing the extent of a given problem in regards to that of a comparative statistic, as only 1 out of every 17 white men may end up in jail. Also, there are statistics about the allocations that were made by various administrations in prison development and how their policies on Black people led to more incarcerations. An example is the Nixon administration, which did target Black people and led to a rise in prisoners from 357,000 in 1970 to over 513,000 in 1980. Another method used by the director is the use of interviews from reputable people in the United States to create evidence and support an unbiased perspective of the story. The interviews are bipartisan, as the interviewees are both drawn from the liberal wing and the conservative wing. From the liberal wing, we had Angela Davis, Henry Lewis, and Van Jones, while from the conservative wing, we have Newt Gingrich and Grover Norquist. Their expositions offer an explanation in how the 13th Amendment has failed in protecting the rights of African Americans, as the system that once made them slaves has now rendered them as criminals. The message is evocative, such as the image of Van Jones in the background of a prison complex with the accompanying words, quote, "locked up in the land of the free," end quote, which is a reference to the 13th Amendment and the impact on people who look like him.
The film tells us the following statistic. Blacks make up 13% of the US population, but they make up 40% of the prison population. US Senator Cory Booker informs us of a startling fact, that with 2.3 million people incarcerated as of 2016, we now have more Black men under federal supervision than all the slaves in the 1850s. Jelani Cobb, a director and professor of history at the University of Connecticut, tells us that slavery is an economic system, and that the first prison boom happened after the Civil War. People of color were arrested en masse for petty crimes, such as loitering, and put into forced labor to rebuild the South. Different forms of media began to create this mythology of Black criminality. Images of congenial Blacks like this image of Uncle Tom were replaced by violent, evil depictions of Blacks against white women. Angela Davis, a well-known activist and professor, tells us that the word criminal began to stand in for race. As the civil rights movement was gaining traction, an idea was propagated that when African Americans are given more rights, there will be more crime. This correlation was misinterpreted and resulted in a causation fallacy. The crime increased due to a demographic change. Baby boomers were becoming adults at that time. To this day, Black men are overrepresented in the news as criminals based on FBI statistics. Another way that policy resulted in more Black Americans being incarcerated was that drug addiction became a crime issue rather than a health issue. Reagan took the problem of economic inequality and hypersegregation in America's cities and the problem of drug abuse and criminalized all of that in the form of the war on drugs. Crack was an inner city issue, while cocaine was a suburban issue. Congress established mandatory sentencing penalties for crack, far harsher than those for powder cocaine. 1 ounce of crack equaled the same amount of prison time as 100 ounces of powder cocaine. These policies separated men from their families for really long prison sentences, and this disrupted Black communities. One of the most persuasive parts of the film was the story of Caleb Browder, a 16-year-old arrested and accused of stealing a backpack. He was told if he pleaded guilty, he would have a criminal record, but he could go home. He refused to take the plea deal and spent 3 years in prison without being charged of any crime. We hear from Caleb Browder himself that his family could not afford the $10,000 bail. Some objects that are used in the film are the videos of other inmates and guards beating up Caleb. Caleb attempted suicide several times. He was released and all charges were dropped. 2 years after his release, he hung himself. He was 22 years old. This film is persuasive by using narrative fidelity probability. It shows us through statistics and testimony by highly respected individuals in their field how African Americans have been denied their freedom and their civil rights by being cast and treated as criminals, beginning right after the Civil War and continuing to this day. It shows us how the criminal justice system has become monetized and Black people are being used by this system to make a profit.